This should be a strange little episode, but I'm going to do it. I watched a documentary on Grant Morrison and Alan Moore, and I saw parallels between Alistair Crowley and Grant Morrison, which people will say, well, obviously, yeah, they're both, bald, shave-headed guys that say magic with a K. And, Alistair Crowley was a big influence openly. It's in the documentary of Grant Morrison. So I'm going to focus more on Grant Morrison, but I guess I could just as equally focus on Alan Moore. These are two guys, Neil Gaiman as well, but to a lesser degree. Both these guys who became, what do you want to call them, luminaries in comics as writers, like had an influence and sway over the developing sensibilities and tastes of generations, right? Grant Morrison and Alan Moore both. I guess I could throw Neil Gaiman in there, but I'm not going to include him, just to get on with it. More openly magic guys are Grant Morrison and Alan Moore. The other guy's just like a liberal, right? So they both practice magic with a K. They don't like each other, which is typical. It's almost like Star Wars Sith Lord stuff. Star Wars Sith Lord stuff is just about is based on dark occult magic type guys. They would have their weird little hermetic orders in the 1920s. I'm not kidding. These guys like Alistair Crowley, who I have to define for you if you don't know who he is. These little magic with a K guys, when all this stuff that Alan Moore and Grant Morrison were influenced by and interested in, that they got first taste of through the music they listened through, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, through the books their moms or dads might have had, which would have been Crowley stuff, occult stuff. Any Crowley influence. Crowley was a guy in 1920s. I would say that was not just 1920s. Crowley was a guy whose influence was felt in the 1900s. He influenced music right up until today. Alistair Crowley, Jay-Z wears them on t-shirts. Lady Gaga poses in photo shoots imitating Alistair Crowley. David Bowie does the same thing. All your biggest rock stars, all your famous people, Led Zeppelin, they all like Alistair Crowley. Now when Grant Morrison and Alan Moore were kids, they were getting influenced by whatever degree Alistair Crowley had influenced popular culture. How did Alistair Crowley influence popular culture? One main thing, do as thou will. But that's not just. His thread of, let's go back in the history of Alistair Crowley and who he was. Alistair Crowley, this is about Grant Morrison and Alan Moore, but I got to talk about Crowley first. So, Crowley is a rich kid, born to conservative, strict Christian parents. Some would say historically abusive. It made Alistair Crowley grow up to be, not grow up to be gay, but Alistair Crowley was gay. He grew up to be rejecting Christianity so much that he ran straight to the devil, and he said so openly. He said Christianity was so horrible, I went straight to Lucifer. So he either wanted to be like the character, he wanted to play the antagonist, he wanted to play the devil character. So what was an influence on Alistair Crowley? Well, first, his probably a repressive Christian upbringing. Not to say that all Christian upbringings are repressive, but his was said to be particularly strict. It was also at a time of trade and translation of a text from Asia, Orientalism and all these things. So you got all these different books of beliefs of the world being traded now. So Crowley gets to see that stuff, and you have whatever other sicko influences are around at the same time, reading books and making pastiches from Eastern traditions and that they were getting, that were translated into English, whatever those translations were, whatever those translations had from the different languages into English. Crowley's reading that stuff and just taking from here and there. Ooh, I like this, I like that, and building his own sensibilities. Then, as a young guy, he gets into some of these occult orders, probably recognizes their bullshit, again, because he grew up with this repressive Christian background that was just too strict and too whatever. The kid snapped, said, oh, I know this is all bullshit, I figured this out when I was a kid. Then gets into these occult organizations, as still Alistair Crowley. As a young man, realizes they're bullshit and says, I might as well just take charge. And it kind of is the history of Crowley. He goes into these occult organizations and sort of either shakes them out, takes them over, and it just becomes a shit starter, and realizes that he starts to understand you can control people through their beliefs. He was manipulated as a kid. He broke his conditioning, and now he realizes he can condition people. And he does, for his own fun and pleasure. He becomes a sicko. And particularly, Crowley is all about sex magic. So it's all about degrading and programming people through sex. He would literally talk, he has books where he talks about rituals of like breaking people psychologically through humiliating sex stuff, which is basically Crowley just, not that all gay men are sickos, but Crowley was a gay sicko. Like, it went too far. He went hentai. He went perverted. He went into depravity with it, with his homosexuality, because he realized that people would go for it with him because they thought they were going to get spiritual goodies. They would do drugs. Crowley would get fucked up on cocaine. Taking drugs was a huge part of Crowley's spirituality. I don't know if it was Crowley or somebody else, but it wasn't Crowley. But the whole idea of systematic derangement of the senses, maybe it was, I don't know who said that, but anyway, it's in the air. You've heard it too. In the documentary on, now to bring it up to what you're interested in, Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison talked about systematic derangement of the senses. He did it. At some point in his life, he had a crack. And he said, fuck it. And he shaved his head, and he had some money. And he did systematic derangement of the senses, which is you kind of psychologically crack yourself through, anything you can think, like any means necessary. It's a Crowley's sort of like, Crowley said to find out like who you were or truly find your inner being, you had to just thoroughly degrade yourself through everything. Just let her rip. Just be fully bacchanalian. Just go crazy. Grant Morrison talks as such. He hangs out, he dresses all in black and leather. He had a transvestite period. This is all very Crowleyan. He was in the 90s club scene with he said he had a tranny face. He admits it himself in his documentary. They even flash a picture. Ooh, here's Grant as a woman. And they made a documentary, I think the documentary was from 2010 or 2011. And I'm like, boy, he's perfectly in comics, in the popular culture. Pop culture is becoming in movies. They're not making Grant Morrison comic book movies, but all the occultism and Crowley stuff that he's interested in, that he and Alan Moore put in. I didn't even get to Alan Moore, or really Grant Morrison yet. All the stuff that these guys put into comic books that they openly say in the documentaries about them that you can watch online, or their interviews where they openly talk about magic and doing rituals. I'm not saying magic and all that stuff is real. I'm saying they believe it, and I'm saying they use comic books to put it in popular culture. Then, popular culture took comic books even further and put it into movies. At first with Batman, with the Dark Knight and all that symbolism, and the Joker and all that kind of stuff. But then further into today, it's all occult symbolism is my point. I'm not saying it's truth, and I'm not saying it's the end of the world and the devil and Armageddon. No, I'm not saying any of that. The book of Revelations was about stuff that happened 20 years after Jesus was dead. That's all. That's all that it was. Go look at history and go look at the book of Revelations. All that shit happened already. About like however many years after Jesus was dead. Somebody really nailed it really good. And then if you just are interested in history, you're like, oh, yeah, I can find this out from a book. It doesn't have to be from a conspiratorial YouTube. Go find somebody's collection of encyclopedias they threw in the garbage, or Bible, whatever's. There's so many books people are just throwing away. They don't care anymore. I just want the file. No. You need the books. You need the books that proves that it was here a long time ago, because it's an old book and you know how long you had it. Books are becoming important. We're Fahrenheit 451ing ourselves, and it includes comic books. But let me come back to what this episode's about. It's not about magic with a K. It's about occult influence on comics, which is just a different mindset of thinking, which you can see the Grant Morrison influence on comics. Well, for starters, through the Invisibles. I mean, it's openly, he never hid it. He always said, I'm the occult guy on the table with the Invisibles. He shaved his head. Grant Morrison did a systematic derangement of the senses to bring it back to that. He shaved his head and then went traveling with his Arkham Asylum money, which is a kind of weird book. Remember, Arkham Asylum was a big hit for him. It came out the same time as Batman the movie, and it was an interesting art book type of thing. Like, what is this thing? It's a Batman book? It's for adults. It's very psychological. You know, it was a big hit. Grant Morrison got some money from that. He says so in his documentary, and he does some traveling, and he has spiritual experiences. He has a systematic derangement of the senses. He has some do as that will, and he does as that will, which is Alistair Crowley, which is Jay-Z. Jay-Z says do as that will, has it on t-shirts. He does the pyramid thing. Jay-Z doing his pyramid thing and his Rockaware and all that stuff. That's Alistair Crowley. Jay-Z openly says Alistair Crowley, I like him. Marina Abramovic is a famous living occultist that's in with all the big Hollywood celebrities. She's always photographed with them. She's hangs out with Jay-Z. Marina Abramovic is also Alistair Crowley person. Led Zeppelin. All the music that Grant Morrison and Alan Moore had to listen to growing up was occult influence, like, you know, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, all that stuff. All their music was, you know, like the Tavistock Institute, all these things. You know, they had the same growing up. Their parents read Crowley books. Grant Morrison said his mom, you know, read Crowley. So these guys have put their occult influence, their admittedly occult influences and sensibilities that they developed growing up, and put them into comic books and gave them to the world. So then here's what happens with comic books. Comic book movies become popular. So people do all their YouTube breakdowns of all the occultism, which is just another people's religious beliefs that are in your superhero comic book movies. So it's true. So you do see this narrative thread. I know this is a very conspiratorial episode, but it's actual. I don't believe in angels and devils and demons and all that kind of stuff. But I will tell you this. These occultists are doing their beliefs into the comic books. Promethea is a hugely occult work by Alan Moore that's praised because of the intricacy of the layers of symbolism and occultism that keep getting decoded in it. Grant Morrison's stuff with quantum physics and time travel. Grant Morrison also brings the New Age, which is a made-up false bullshit agenda, which is, again, Crowley has a part of bringing in New Age, because what is New Age? It's just a pastiche of Eastern religions. All the things that Grant Morrison does with magic, just at its core, to get cold with it now in this part of the episode, equates to globalism, which is a long-term plan. I used to say read 5 books and I wouldn't tell you the books. I'll tell you to read 1 book. Go fucking read A Brave New World, and then go listen to A Brave New World, and then go listen to the audio data file of 1984 and A Brave New World. Those 2. Go listen to them. Quick, easy studies, and then go find the original thing that They Live is based on. They Live is based on a short story by somebody you can find out. Carpenter admits it himself. He says, yeah, it's based on a short story. It's a short story. It's interesting. So anyway, go read those things and understand that A Brave New World, you're soaking in it. We live in a brave new world. We're there. But part of that is this getting all the religions to come together. So all that, and now I know it sounds crazy and I'm going all over the place, it would seem, but I will bring this web all together. It's tied together. The soup, it tastes good at the end. Well, it tastes terrible, but it does come together. So you got Marvel SJWs now, which is what they call it, what, a neo-Marxist movement, new Marxism. And then other people a little bit above that will say, well, it's not really Marxism. What it is next stage capitalism, because they know geopolitics. They know, like, they know who they know Bernays, they know Bertrand Russell, they know all these other guys, social engineering people, assholes. They understand H.G. Wells. They went to school for this stuff. Maybe you or I don't understand it so well, but they understand that this stuff has been planned out a long time ago. Crowley's a cog in that wheel. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, Crowley is a kid. He has an uptight Christian upbringing to get on with it. Too restrictive, God knows what else. And he comes from money. He gets to read all these translations of Asian texts, and he makes a pastiche. There's other people in his same time as him, Ani Passant, Ledbetter, who's the other woman, the Blavatsky, the Theosophical Society, all these little cultural engineers and people caught up in the soup of it, the Order of the Golden Dawn, all these little different, L. Ron Hubbard, Crowley, these guys knew each other. They were in the same circles. So you got Grant Morrison, Alan Moore, and to a lesser degree Neil Gaiman, I guess you suppose. They all get into comics with their own sensibilities. I don't think they were put there by government or whatever. But isn't it interesting that in Grant Morrison's documentary, right at the beginning, he lets you know that his dad was in the government, stopped working for the government. His dad was a big anti-bomb guy. And he lets you know that that developed Grant Morrison's sensibilities. But also his mother was interested in Crowley and the occult. And Grant Morrison's mom told him some crazy shit. Look, you're from the stars. You're from the Pleiades. Or whatever it was in the documentary. Yeah, Grant Morrison grew up with that and stuff. And I'm not saying Grant Morrison is a nice guy, but he believes in magic. He openly tells you he does rituals. I saw a thing on him on YouTube where he's sitting with a guy in one of these, what do they call it, emo bands? And he's saying, this is the song that John Lennon gave me when I tripped out and got really stoned or on hashish or whatever he says. And he did a John Lennon song that he came up with, which was like, I'm not going to knock Grant Morrison being a musician or whatever. I'm just saying, like, he brought that to comics. And a lot of people, and the girls like him. Grant Morrison's a handsome Lex Luthor, is he not? And then Grant Morrison is like Jareth, the Goblin King, that the teenage girls want to rub up against, right? I'm not sure if they really want to get that involved with the guy, but ooh, they like Grant Morrison. And Alan Moore's your dad, right? He's your cult father. He's leading... Alan Moore, rather. Alan Moore talks like the dad. I'm your father, I talk like this. And Grant Morrison talks like this, blah, 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 blah. But he can still fuck you, and he can still, he's still a man of the world and everything. And he had his tranny phase. He brings in transhumanist agenda. He brings in anybody that brings in everything Crowley. I mean, Grant Morrison's documentary says, they say something to him at the end of his documentary, like, is there anything you want to leave people with? And he's like, yeah, love me. And I was like, yeah, it's the supremely Crowleyan statement, right? Alistair Crowley said, it's all about me. And then you got in your comic books to just jump to another point that's still Crowleyan. Crowley wanted to usher in this thing called he wanted to create, and he did. He helped create what he wanted. He said the age of the infant emperor, where we would all be little self-absorbed kings and queens in our own world, but like never growing up, always being infants, subjecting ourselves willfully to every kind of perversion and loving it. You know what I mean? Like the old, like Pan and Bacchus and all this, like, orgies and occultism. Crowley was all about it. When you talk about Crowley, you're talking about sex magic. And I'm not saying Grant Morrison is like that, but you do have the very occult work, the very weird and also pedophilic tome done in full color with a great labor of love and care done by a man and a woman. This work of pedophilia by Alan Moore, where he takes all your popular cultural characters and has them do orgies and sexual acts in that Lost Girls or whatever. Can you even buy that book anymore? Is it legal now? Is it illegal now? I mean, I don't know why you'd want to have it, but I've seen it. It's gross. It's a labor of love. It's a tome of... And then you got Promethea, which is... Or is it Promethea or Prometheus? Promethea. I guess it would have to be Promethea because it's about feminine stuff. Alan Moore's an occultist. Everything that we have now is about this feminine stuff. You have SJW Marvel, where Thor, the god of thunder, of male potency in comic books, has had his dick taken away. And now Thor is a woman. I'm Lady Thor. I shoot cum now. Transhumanist agenda. You're social engineers. I know I'm jumping all over the place. But you're social engineers. You're guys that understand that it's not neo-Marxism. It's not social justice warrior. It's just next part of capitalism, which is not really capitalism. It's globalism. So to take it's like Marxism, no. Capitalism, no. Well, yes, but really globalism. Globalization. It's really about everybody living the same way to make globalization understandable quickly. It's to get rid of every type of person they don't want and to shape everybody into the type of person they want. It's been written about a long time ago. And it's true because all the steps of their plan, enough of their plan has fallen through that the guys a long time ago said, this is what we're going to do, ... And you're not even going to know it now, and I'm talking to you, and I'm spitting into your face, and I'm telling you that we're going to do this to you. This is your social engineers. And then they wrote it in books, and now we're at the point where people are going, oh, fuck, it happened. We're living in it. We're soaking in it. A Brave New World, 1984, Big Brother, we have it. But only the trick is 1984 is happening in the form of not big brother, big sister. Do you understand now? And weirdly, how am I bringing you to this? Through Grant Morrison and Alan Moore, because I'm trying to get the attention of smart thinking people who read comic books, because smart thinking people do read comic books, and their attention's being wasted on stuff like this. But it's not that magic is real and you're gonna go to hell or demons or whatever. And it's not I'm not an atheist or anything like that. But I'm not coming to you from a religious background. I'm saying this is just social engineering for rich, wealthy, elite families that said, we want to do this with people. Now go out, my levels of managers, and put out books and works and just make it an open conspiracy. Just tell everybody what we're going to fucking do. They have no idea how long-term our plan is. We're going to die. It's an inherited plan. These motherfuckers die and inherit the plan and then have it carried out generationally. It's true, because so much of the plan has been fulfilled. And guys like Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, through the influence of their belief systems, which is occultism and magic, through Alistair Crowley. Alistair Crowley is one of your puppet guys. He got what he wanted. He's a puppet, but he's also a social engineer. But he's also a guy who helps stir culture in a big bad way. If you are a big David Bowie fan, if you are a big Led Zeppelin fan, the Beatles had Alistair Crowley on their big breakthrough Sgt. Pepper album. They have him on their album as one of their, here's all of our influences. All those people on the back of the album, the reason the Beatles have all those people on their Sgt. Pepper's famous album cover is because those people were their influences. So Alistair Crowley was an influence on the Beatles. He was an influence on Led Zeppelin because they put him in their songs. David Bowie says Crowley, like Hunky Dory is like a fucking, I love Crowley. New Order of the Golden Dawn, Golden Shower, Pee on Me, all things, all, like he does songs to Dylan, he does songs to Andy Warhol, he does songs to Crowley, he does songs to The Coming Race, Nazism. It's all in that beautiful folk album Hunky Dory is loaded with shit. Grant Morrison is a musician. I don't know if Alan Moore does music, but I know Alan Moore and Grant Morrison both are artists. Now they grew up reading Western comics and those comic heroes, so they wanted to do those guys. But even in keeping with the tradition of magic, Grant Morrison and Alan Moore don't like each other. Famously, David Bowie and the guy Jimmy Page, both occultists. Fucking A, David Bowie bought Alistair Crowley's house from Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page bought Alistair Crowley's house and he sold it to David Bowie. Or somewhere. I forget who bought it first, but one sold it to the other one. So there you go. So then you got Grant Morrison. Go look him up. Even if you don't like Grant Morrison's stories, watch about what Grant Morrison says when he talks about his life. He talks about doing all these occult rituals and having spiritual experiences and doing drugs. And I talked to the scorpion god when I don't know if it was DMT or whatever he was talking about. I think he just said hash or whatever. But I did drugs and I talked to this incarnate entities and blah, 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 blah. And so you got all these things that are in the soup of culture. You got the quantum physics, which is your science doing full circle back into your science religion. Science becoming religion, doing a full loop into, all your old religions and traditions, they were really talking about stuff that's science now, and it was always the same thing. Everything's just one big soup. Just like Jim Carrey's being a maniac and saying to people now, we don't matter, you don't matter, I don't matter, be whatever you want, because it doesn't matter. We're all just nothing. We don't matter. And in a weird way, that do as that will is happening in the world. Everybody's doing as that will. And the comic SJWs are saying, no, we don't care if people don't read comics. We'll either get what we want and burn down comics. And I feel like Grant Morrison created all that, and Alan Moore created all that. These guys went into comics, created a shitstorm, developed sensibilities of the generations that were coming up. And now you have new comics creators. A lot of these people love Grant Morrison, and they're trans people or transitioning. And they're like, no, Grant Morrison's a friend of people, and he brings in this new kind of spirituality. Yeah, because he got you to think about occult stuff. He got you to degrade the sensibilities that were the former sensibilities of comics, which has created this thing called Comicsgate, where there's old programmed kids who grew up reading comic books which were the sensibilities of the guys who wrote all the old comic books. You know what I mean? I'm not going to keep going back to the Adam of creating comic books to these guys were the first creators and stuff. But you understand, like, it's generational. These old guys created comic books for kids, which gave kids the sensibilities of the greatest generation, right? Because these guys that created the comic books were guys that were of the greatest generation, right? So then they create comic books, and then those kids get those sensibilities. And you can see how they get degraded and watered down with things like, because the world changed. You got Reaganomics and Frank Miller's The Dark Knight, okay? You got Reaganomics and Alan Moore. You got 1984 and Big Brother. But also you got Alan Moore's influence of his occultism, you know, in everything that he does. You got his weird torture porn in, not From Hell, V for Vendetta, where he's talking about how you break a woman and program her into a CIA mind control agent, or a British UK equivalent of that. How you break somebody, breaking a woman, torturing a woman. You got, I mean, you see what I mean? Like, it's all this like weird, what I would call government programming is in their themes of their work, but they came to it through occultism. So you got Grant Morrison, who's a young guy reading Alan Moore's stuff and admitting that he's influenced by Alan Moore, which helps further get him into the occult. And what's Alan Moore's other famous work? Jack the Ripper's story. You know what I mean? So all this stuff about the people who know about, like, are interested in geopolitics and social engineering, and how every degree of our entertainment, like I said, right now comics is being co-opted into just a thing that's owned, where comics will get cheap again, but not until all the messages are just the messages of globalization. You're having the globalization of comics, which has to be shutting down of comics and shutting down of independent publishers, so that independent publishers have to be bought up, and so the independent publishers also have to be infiltrated with a mindset that's already pre-thunk and pre-thought out to be these social justice warriors, which again just plows through. These guys are just puppets and shills for a social engineering, social justice warrior. I want people to see this episode because I came at it from Grant Morrison and Crowley and occult, but I tricked you. Gotcha, bitch. I'm kidding, you're not a bitch. You're a smart person if you stayed this far. This is what's happening to comics. It's a social engineering ploy. It doesn't have to be about magic being real or devils or demons. It's just find out your social engineering history of New Age agenda. Grant Morrison's got that. Alan Moore's got that. They hot beef injected it into comics, and you lapped up your comics with cum, and now you know what sigils are and all these wankathons, and you got it brought perversion into comics. All right? Not necessarily Frank Miller. He comes from a conservative, like, Republican background. He doesn't have that occult interest or any of that stuff. He's coming from it from his political standpoint. But Grant Morrison, and Alan Moore bring in the occult stuff. And I guess you could say that Neil Gaiman brings in occult stuff, but I would say he's more like your liberal balance to the you got like Frank Miller and Alan Moore, you know what I mean? And then what you have happening now with, I don't read comics now, but what I see what's happening with the Comicsgate thing and all these different hashtags to get people to buy comics. You got to understand what's happening with comics is it's a corporation thing. It's in a weird way, I don't know what to say. There's like 6 kind of companies that own stuff. You can see the math of this yourself. And maybe it's more than 6, but I think it's like 6 companies. Disney's one of them. Disney's a big chunk of that pie chart. Anyway, the Disney pie chart says Disney can get comics, and it's easy to shut it down. Shut down the comic shops. And if you have any big famous places and metropolitans, turn them into, like, Disney's gonna own them or whatever, and the guy will be there that you used to until he dies or whatever. But even that doesn't matter. So it's just like, comics is a way, it's the free press. It's the last bastion of free press and print, where people could print, you know, if you have a physical printing press, you could print comics and have them say whatever you want and do that. And people do. Independent comics is that. But people aren't reading independent comics, and it's a small niche market. But comics has become like, people went to comics to decide what Hollywood is. Everything that happens in Hollywood now is influenced by comics. Comics, a lot of comic book heroes, again, we're using the same symbolisms. Ancient myth symbolisms, you know, like Jack Kirby and Stan Lee knew about all the gods and stuff, and the books they would have read at the times would have been like Chariots of the Gods. All the, you know, like them as adults writing for comic books are reading books like Chariots of the Gods and other social engineering propaganda and other bullshit stuff that would have been coming out at the time. Carlos Castaneda, I mean, Jack Kirby's The New Gods. He was interested in mythology, Greek gods, all that stuff is in there. Spider-Man, some kind of amazing arachnid. There's some occult symbolism. Moon Boy, Devil Dinosaur and Moon Boy. Give me a fucking break. That's the Moonchild. Alistair Crowley's the Moonchild. So, you know, at some point Jack Kirby read this stuff. Steve Ditko and LSD and drugs and his conservatism and whatever Steve Ditko was going through in the 1960s. You see, we have enough history of comics to see the social engineering of comics and to what degree Alan Moore and Grant Morrison play a part. They bring in those occult threads, but really, not really. It started with Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. And comics guys, if you're still here, you gotta read a book by Dan Clowes called Pussy. I don't care if you like Dan Clowes' art style. A lot of people won't read his stuff because they don't like his viewpoints or his ugly art style. That's what they call it. But Dan Clowes, I'm telling you, Dan Clowes is the guy who created that thing called Ghost World. That's a movie about SJWs or hipsters. But anyway, Dan Clowes knew what a hipster was. Dan Clowes knows what a social justice warrior was. And Dan Clowes wrote a book called Pussy about Stan Lee. Pussy is spelled Pussey. And in the book Pussy, Dan Clowes creates a character called Dr. Infinity that is Stan Lee. If you want to know really who Stan Lee is and why guys like Alex Roth don't... Yeah, Alex Roth. Is it Alex Roth? Yeah. Alex Roth, the guy who did those painted watercolor books. He doesn't like Stan Lee, and he knows why. He probably has that book Pussy on his bookshelf. He understands about Stan Lee. I don't think Stan Lee's a good guy. I think Stan Lee lived so long, living after eating the hands and souls and he ate the spirit, he crushed the spirits and ate them and made them digestible to live so long. I'm not saying he's fucking his nurses are trying to pull his pecker out in front of him, but when you're that old, you might as well give it a shot, if he did it. But I think Stan Lee did a lot of other bad things, and there's a lot of people still alive today that could substantiate that for you, that Stan Lee was kind of probably a terrible dude and didn't really create all the things that they said he created. He just kind of like was a writer and a shaper and a formulator. Not to say he's an interesting guy and worthy of something, but whatever. But anyway, that's what's going on. That's your whole soup of comics, and it's kind of the history of it. These guys, all your comics creators were influenced by the stuff they read. So a lot of comics creators, why they're not happy now with what's happening in comics is because they have conservative views, especially if they grew up reading comics. Not all of them, but some of them. If they like the Cap and they like the traditional Marvel and DC, these guys were, I guess what you were saying, could say are sort of holding on to just traditional family values. But with the 80s and 90s sensibilities changing with guys like Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman and other guys I didn't mention that came in, that weren't like social engineers that came in to destroy comics or whatever, but they were kind of picked. They were picked by somebody to come over the shores to work for Marvel. And you got the Alan Moore Swamp Thing, very philosophical. I couldn't comment on that, but I haven't read it. But I know some of the things about that. There does get into some occultism and symbolism and ecology, environmentalism, earth stuff. The resources, all this globe is about climate change. Is there anything in Swamp Thing about that? Probably not. Probably more about people and sexuality. They made Swamp Thing eventually elemental. Again, that's putting occultism in comics. They also have this weird new age science stuff of quantum physics and time travel. Grant Morrison is like all over that stuff into comics. Like that's kind of one of his things, isn't it? He did this All-Star Superman, which is really fantastic. But in my edited version, I have to admit, I would remove all that stuff of Jimmy Olsen trying on pantyhose and all that stuff. And there's a couple other things, but it's a pretty neat book. The idea of like appreciation for Superman. My Superman mythos would be like this. Superman's an alien. He sees how fantastic man is and decides to be a steward. He's like, wow, mankind is something fascinating. That's you and me. Man took us in, and there's like these weird guys like Bruce Wayne and these horrible tortured beings, and on this planet that's all messed up. This tortured guy like Bruce Wayne manages to get it together and uses resources to try and like keep turning the clock back, and he's this weird, you know what I mean? He's this weird tortured guy who makes weapons as the military-industrial complex, but at the same time wants to somehow create world peace, and he's a mess. So Superman's this alien that says, wow, I'm not one of these people, but they showed me love, and love did something to Superman. Love did something to this Kal-El guy and made him this guy that says, wow, I'm going to protect these people until these people fucking wake up. I like the idea of Superman. If you're going to bring Superman into a new way of thinking about Superman, I think of Superman like that. Clark Kent is who who he pretends to be. He's like, I'll pretend to be this neurotic guy, but I think people are pretty great. These people, these freaking dumb farmers took a Martian baby in, and they took care of me, and they showed me love, and I grew up, and this woman showed, like a Lana Turner, whatever the fuck her name is, he falls in love with women, he understands, like, wow, like, I'm not one of these people, I can rule these people, but he's like, I get it. It's like Superman's like not even human, but he gets like, he can't abuse what being a human is. So it's like, my idea of Superman, my opinion would be like, Superman's this guy that's like, he's just like got transformed by what's great about man, which would be love. There, you want to get new age, you want to get philosophical, you want to get preachy about Superman's story. That's the kind of Superman story I'd give you. The one where Superman just kind of protecting mankind to like wake up and stop this shit. Maybe you could do a Superman story where instead of we have Trump as King Baby, I know that's Marvel, but instead of you have Trump as King Baby, or you get your SJW DC like you're going to get this year more fully. It's going to come on more fully. It's going to be better written though. It's going to be more subversive. You're going to get more subversive social justice messages that you don't like, but you're going to get more meat and potatoes. But anyway, I forget where I was going with that. Anyway, Superman, what you could do with him now is you could have him say, I can't do this anymore. I've been waiting for you guys to stop warring and fighting and wake up, saving the planet how many times, helping all the other heroes, helping them through their shit, trying to get it together, trying to raise my sons, whatever they're doing with Superman now, trying to raise my daughters, my super kids. And it's like, you gotta check yourselves. Here's all the good things about mankind, and here's all the things you need to stop. And it doesn't have to be about attacking somebody. I mean, it's like if you want to put your worldview in the comics, you got to sell comics. And they figured out, what happened is now they figured out that nobody's going to buy comic books about your superheroes going on shopping sprees or dating. It was fun to make superheroes more fleshed out people by having them do those things. That's why people like the issue of Peter Parker fixing a car with the Flash. It was like, oh, we get to see these guys doing that, but that's one issue. That's not every issue for like 5 years. You know what I mean? You don't have to, it's sensibility changes, it's social engineering. I got to get back on point. And I think that those guys came in through occultism, through the books they read, through who their parents were growing up. And you see how it happens. Jack Kirby, Stan Lee were these kind of guys. Steve Ditko were these kind of guys. Then you have like John Romita Jr. and those guys, and the guys who made Kirby, the guys who made the school in New Jersey, and all this, you know what I mean? The different generations that came in with the sensibilities. Dan, Jim Lee, all these fucking, I can't name names. I'm trying to think of them, and I'm just stumbling over names. There's so many names. Neil Adams, all these guys that develop sensibilities. Frank Miller, all these guys. You see it generationally change until you have the guys we have now, which I have to admit I'm less familiar with. So you have this conflict of sensibilities. Younger sensibilities from the guys who had like disconnected. The SJWs are disconnected. They don't have like, they're connected to each other sort of loosely, but they don't know how to bond with other people, they don't know how to communicate. So the comic books show that in their psychology. The comic books don't communicate well, they're not well received, and they don't know how to respond to people well through social media. So I'll end it with this. They're using social media to like ruin people's careers and reshape the media, which social engineers are happy to do. So somebody is not firing these people and letting them have their jobs to have comic books be the mess that it is. And it also doesn't hurt that people are conflicted. As many conflicts that could be happening right now in the world as the time I'm recording this as possible is great. Have people distracted as 6 ways to Sunday, as many ways as possible, talking about stuff like comic books. But I would like talking about comic books because I know that people that read comic books are to some degree intellectually intelligent, but their intellectual intelligence is being diverted and focused on stuff like comic books. We realize how powerful comic books are to create messages, to develop sensibilities, to shape generations, because we can see how the generations were shaped now, those who read comics, even though it's not everybody. But comic books had such a big impact that now they become blockbuster cinema globally. So since they're popular globally, why not just control all of how comics works with, the main superheroes that are icons to everyone in the world knows them now. We can use those to sell anything. How to think. You can have Iron Man, do a commercial about gun control, whatever you can use these guys for whatever you want now. But you have to control every aspect of them, and you have to just shut down. It's just like I said, they're gonna, the plan. Like if I was paid to do this, I would just say, well, we're just gonna like plow through with some losses financially, but you have so much money anyway, you're not really losing anything. We're just gonna just like plow through with losing money, and we'll take shit for a while until we get comics to be exactly what we want. So that's what I see happening right now. And guys like Grant Morrison, Grant Morrison like kind of checked out. Like he's like, ooh, I'm out. I'm just gonna do heavy metal and do the kind of stories. I haven't picked up an issue of heavy metal, and it's probably in a poly bag now. But I'm gonna go to like a Barnes and Nobles into the dirty section, and I'm gonna get like next to the titty magazines, and I'm gonna get a heavy metal magazine and pull that. I'm just gonna fucking open the bag, and I'm gonna see what's in there. I wonder if what Grant Morrison is doing now with heavy metal is sort of an antidote to what's happening. I wonder if he said that. I'll have to watch a video. I know that that's what he does now. He's the guy that said, I think I'm just going to go over here to heavy metal now. So did Alistair Crowley come in like a lame ass? I mean, Alistair Crowley. Did Grant Morrison come into comics sort of like a lame ass Alistair Crowley come in and rock and roll it up and get people sexed up about comics and made comics sexy and become a rock star in a way that Alan Moore just couldn't, and comes into comics and gets people interested in magic and occult? Because I'll tell you right now, we're living in what I would call the end of an occult era. There's people that have all these weird occult beliefs, and they're doing them in all their, like, you know, like Lady Gaga's always playing with blood and doing pentagrams and all this silly stuff like that. And again, these are all Aleister Crowley people. Jay-Z does these things too. I think we're coming from a huge, there's like a letdown that a bunch of people are going to have, like, you know, culturally, with all their weird belief systems and stuff. That's just my personal opinion. It doesn't have that much to do with comics. But it's like, I lost my train of thought. It doesn't matter. I said so much about it anyway. But you see what I'm saying? Like, just get cold about it. Forget all the stuff you don't like about this episode if you've stuck this far. Look at what you've got going on. It's like they're not going to let go of your comic books. It's like a pit bull bite. They bit into your, they bit into comics, and they're just going to hang until you let go of the tree and Captain America is dead. And this is the outlandish prediction, but I predict that Captain America, they're not even going to let you call it Captain America. They're going to kill him this year in 2018. I'm recording this. They're going to kill Captain America, and it won't even be allowed to be called America anymore. It'll be like something else. Or if they do keep it Captain America, if that's too soon, it's going to be a woman. It's going to be Captain America. It's going to be a woman next. I think we did have Black Captain America. I'm not sure. We're going to have a woman. We'll either have a black lesbian Captain America woman with a shaved head. I don't know. Is she going to... I don't... But anyway, yeah, this is the thing. I said, it's like they're just going to hang on to comics. And even if you shoot the pit bull and it dies, it'll die, but it'll still just drop. You know, it'll just be dead hanging there. You know what I mean? Because it's like, the other people are saying, the people inside the industry are saying the SJWs inside comics are poor people that are like, they're not making a lot of money. They believe in it. It's like they're social justice warriors. They believe in it. It means something to them. They want the world to change in the way that they see it. They think the world will be better this way. It means something to them. And that hurts my chest, because I could make fun of those people, but I can't anymore. Because I'm like, no, they're being used. And a lot of people, the people who understand that it isn't Marxism or neo-Marxism or next level capitalism, the people that understand that it's a long-term plan for globalization where everybody has to behave the same way. So and look, there's other stuff you can check out online, like BBC's open stuff where it has like a robot English lady saying, in the future, once a year on your birthday, you will be given proteins. And it's like, what? And they're saying this is your future. And you got all kinds of other weird TV shows like Black Mirror and stuff. But that's what's happening with your comic books. I'll keep a focus on that. So there you go. There's your history of Alan, through the thread of Alan Moore and Grant Morrison. I have woven you Alistair Crowley through media and through popular culture and music and what's going on with your comic book situation. It sounds strange, but it really is this. I hope anybody saw this, because and Twitter is getting sued right now. Anybody who's had their career or livelihood messed with because of social media people on Twitter or wherever else, blocking people out of jobs or getting people fired from their jobs. Hey, comic book guys that are trying to save your superheroes, trying to save your gods, trying to save the old gods and keep them for what Jack Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, and Steve Ditko, and a couple other guys made them to be. Sorry, I don't remember all the names. If you want to keep them, Frank Frazetta I'll throw in there. He didn't really create anything cool though. If you want to save your heroes, maybe help this Twitter case become a bigger thing. There's a bunch of people want to sue Twitter, or I think it's going to be bigger than that. I think it's going to be a social media case. It needs to be a case against YouTube and stuff too. Hey, stop telling us we can't say what we want to say. Who cares if you don't like what we say? Why can't we say it? Just stop kids from seeing gore and horror and perversions of sex things. Block that from YouTube, but don't let them. Don't stop people from talking about the news. Just don't let them, like, make them sign in to be 18 if they want to see somebody else's idea of fake news or whatever you want to believe. That's what needs to happen. But I can see in comic books it's an easy one for me to wrap up. I feel like, oh, I could pick on comics because it's like an easy case, you know? So to me, it's easy, but I have a whole big super shit I mentioned to you there. It's like this, all right? It's just, it's not magic with a K. Oh, be scared about demons with horns and Grant Morrison and Alan Moore are evil dudes. No, it's like they put their sensibilities of the stuff that their personal interests, they're artists. They put their personal interests in what they're interested in, comic books and magic. They put them together, which works great for, you know, the world, for the brave new world that we live in right now. They kind of fit into that. They're influenced by Alistair Crowley. Alistair Crowley was influenced by a bunch of things. Alistair Crowley was an abused dude. Alistair Crowley worked for the government as well too. So they had him do all kinds of dirty work that they wanted him to do, and he said, "I'll do it," because you know, do as thou wilt. Jay-Z, you heard about Jay-Z, whether you like him or not. He's a big popular guy, and everybody tells you how fucking great he is, even though I don't like him. Everybody tells you how great he is. All you superstars, go do your superstar things doing your pyramids. I don't think it's true. I don't believe Illuminati, any of that stuff. It doesn't matter. They just believe in this Alistair Crowley stuff. It's great for musicians because it's very selfish. It's great for actors and musicians and artists and people because it tells you to do whatever you want. It's the ultimate expression, is to be a creative artist, to do as thou will. Create whatever you want to create. It's all good. Explore everything. And it's destructive. There has to be like morals and values to hold a planet of people together. Otherwise, we're just at each other's throat all the time. At first, on Twitter, at first by attacking each other through comic books or movies and TV, and then through social media, through Twitter and Facebook, and then in the streets. First with signs in the streets, and then with little things in the streets where a bunch of rich people get us to fight with each other and make mini bullshit revolutions and get people all uppity about, I know I said it like that, but there's a reason why. People get all uppity about the Black Panther, the Stan Lee created comic book movie for black people made by Disney, to get a segment of the population just to get angry and stir some shit up and feel like sort of falsely empowered to be deflated at the same time slapped in the face, just to stir some shit. Basically, ultimately, if I was your social engineer to do the evil stuff they wanted me to do, it's just another way to get black people to get beat up and hurt again, to get further treated like shit again. And they don't even see it like that. They want to champion Black Panther like it's getting them somewhere. And it's not. It's a social engineering tool by Disney, one of the biggest things on the planet. Disney has one of the most monies as a company on the planet. And they own Marvel. And they're somehow doing something with Fox, unless that was considered a monopoly. But there you go. There's your comics. You got it? Get it? Got it? Good. I could keep talking, but it's going to be the same stuff. I think that's good enough. That's episode. Get your comics back. I want people to, I don't read them. I want people to get the heroes back. I want to take them away from companies. You got to take them away. You got to break up. I don't know. It's the beginning of a thing. It's the beginning of a fight for freedoms through social media. Twitter's happening. The comic stuff is happening. Change it. I told you, Grant Morrison, he went in there, he did some stuff, and he's like, I'm out. They wouldn't have him anymore. Is there going to be scandals about stuff he did? Did he try to do comics orgies, or they still love that guy? I don't know. That's it.